And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you. Welcome. Welcome to another round of the Mastermind here on our Sunday morning broadcast on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and on livinginblack.com. We get together with you from 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's 12 noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. East African time, or I should say 5 p.m. BST, and 8 p.m. East African time. We get together with you and we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspectives, entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity and development. Today's date is Sunday, the 20, no, it is not the 20th, it's the 10th day of January, the 10th day of August. Excuse me, I'm all confabulated over here. 2025 in the Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6265 in the Kemetic calendar, to which we realign our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, and on livinginblack.com. So let me do this. Let me bring in our guests, our co-host for today. First of all, Baba Junius is in the house. Aquaba, welcome to you, Baba Junius. I hope you are in good spirits today.
Madasi, thank you for the invitation. Yes, I am, and I'm raring to go.
Good. And we have Brother Dwara in the house as well. Aquaba, welcome to you, Brother Dwara.
Thank you, Babas. Shikamoni to you both, and Ubuntu Ma'at to the global LIB radio family.
And for some odd reason, I am having a very difficult time getting the Rumble broadcast out of commercial mode over here. So bear with me while I was struggling with that. Okay, it is going out of commercial mode. And welcome to the program today. Take a deep breath. Yes, it was a wild entry to the program. But we are up and live and direct. And I know you, brothers, have brought something very interesting for our audience to feast upon today.
Yeah, a lot of things going on. You almost don't know where to start. Let's start on the continent. There's an article in Responsible Statecraft, responsiblestatecraft.com, that addresses the U.S. bombing of Somalia with air and drone strikes. So far, there have been 36 official strikes, and they look at not only what's going on with the U.S. and Somalia, but they also look at what's going on in the region, whether other factors are involved. So Turkey's involved. There are other things going on in Somaliland and Ethiopia and Egypt because of the situation with the dams and all of that. So we need to keep an eye on that because U.S. legacy media doesn't tell us all the evil that the empire is doing. And of course, they're doing it under the auspices of anti-terrorism and fighting supposed terrorists there.
Mm-hmm. There is also a similar story brewing out of Ghana, or not Ghana, Ethiopia, which is, of course, right adjacent to Somalia. Ethiopia, the ruling party, blames historical enemies, quote unquote, historical enemies, internal traitors for renewed plot to destabilize Ethiopia. That story from August 8th appeared on allafrica.com. So I do agree with you, Baba Junius. We should be very, very alert. We should have dedicated teams to analyzing what is happening on the mother continent. Brother Dwara, you have some input to this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Baba. It's interesting. We must keep in mind that the Horn of Africa is like the Haiti of the continent, or better said, that Haiti is like the Horn of Africa, in that they will never forgive Haiti or Ethiopia for one, Haiti being the only or the first, I should say, successful African revolution waged against Eurasians, in which
Mm-hmm.
the black people won. And then for Ethiopia, being the only or one of the only African countries, the biggest African country, if you will, to never have been successfully colonized. And they will not let the Horn of Africa rest. And that's just one reason. That's one reason.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty interesting thought that you put out there, and I agree with you. I think there's really no hole in that argument that I could, pick apart, tear apart. That it is this historical disdain for the fact that Africans stood up, resisted successfully, and then with Haiti, in the case of Haiti,
Hmm.
the Haitians were carrying the model to other African states, and there was a
Yeah.
fear, a great fear, that all of the African states in the Western Hemisphere would follow Haiti's example and revolt, and rebel against their enslaving colonizers. So I think you're making a very good point there, Baba Junius.
Also, Haiti was the model that many enslaved Africans on the mainland here in North America used, and that struck fear in beginning with Thomas Jefferson and the reactionary American government
Hmm.
maintained embargoes, refused to recognize them, and imposed embargoes that lasted over 100 and some years. And of course, we're all familiar with the various invasions and neo-colonial governments that they established there. The situation in East Africa is, in my view, a counter to what Keely was talking about in terms of the growth of that region, in terms of that region coming together to form alliances, trade, uh, uh, lowering trade barriers, building rail lines, projecting progress. And I think that's a means to undermine all of that, not just there, but in Sudan. And we're seeing the situation in other parts of Africa. And we could talk about Donald Trump's move to bring so-called peace, but he's really looking for the mineral resources that the Congo has. And here, the Horn of Africa, you're talking about the geostrategic location and how important it is to global trade as well as the aspirations of the neo-colonials.
Mm-hmm. Now, Baba Junius, as you are speaking, I'm getting this talk, talk, talk sound. Are you hearing that, Tawara?
Yeah, it's like a blip.
Yeah, I'll turn this, something's happening with my printer, so I'll turn it off.
Oh, okay, okay. All right, yeah, much, much better. Um,
The the other thing I was going to quickly say too is that look at Ethiopia. Because Ethiopia was never successfully colonized, they strove the Eurasian colonizers strove to suffocate and put a stranglehold on that country. That is the largest country that is landlocked and has no direct access to the Red Sea because the colonizers choked it off, cut it off by colonizing Djibouti, Eritrea, Somaliland, and Somalia to some degree, and strove to starve Ethiopia from having access to the Red Sea. That was planned by design, and so that's another added on evidence of attack against the Horn of Africa and specifically Ethiopia, of which Eritrea and Djibouti and Somaliland were once originally a part of.
and I would add to this, we must also remember the last time this confederation of nations
Mm,
was together, all together. We're talking about Somaliland, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea. Djibouti, they formed the Aksum Empire.
I'll say.
I don't know how many people out here listening today are aware that at the time, which is around the year 0 to 300 AD in the Western calendar, about that time, Aksum Empire was one of the 4 leading empires in the world, because that Aksum Empire controlled very strategic waterways between Europe, or what we know as Europe, Western Asia, and what we now recognize as India and other parts of going into the African Ocean, aka Indian Ocean. That was a very important part of the world, and as a consequence of being in that strategic point, Aksum was a very powerful empire.
Not only that, they had relations with other parts of Africa. In other words, they had a centralized unit of arrangements with the countries that modern countries that you mentioned, but they also had trade and commerce, and I'm sure they had a lot of cultural influence on other parts of Africa as well.
Right. And I would even go so far from when I was in Ethiopia, and Baba Kiti, I know you've been there as well, that even Yemen was at one point a part of the Aksumite Empire as well, and maybe even stretched even further into Asia than we realize, perhaps even touching part of Saudi Arabia.
But don't forget, look at Drusilla Dunjee Houston's her work that talks about the influence of the Kushites. So that's part and parcel of all of that.
The wonderful Ethiopians of the Kushite Empire. Ashe.
Ashe. A great book. And that was one of the fundamental books that we were asked to study as we growing into our Pan-African world view by Drusilla Dundee Houston. And I do agree it is a very, very important book. I, of course, have it on my bookshelf. So looking at this kingdom of Aksum, is it possible, is it probable that the European powers or colonial powers, those who are seeking at this point to recolonize Africa and to impose external values across Africa, are in great fear of the Aksum Empire reconstituting itself because of the similarity of the peoples throughout that region?
I would say yes. And I think we sometimes either pretend or don't realize that so many of these Eurasian military historians are very, very, very well versed in these African empires and these African battles. And I think we deceive ourselves to think that we have not been studied very, very closely. What I would conversely say to our people is how well versed are we in their tactics as well?
Yeah, that's a good point you make.
And also when you talk about Eurasians studying us, when they're defeated, they go back and do a debriefing. That's why one of the reasons why they study the tactics of Hannibal Barca, because they're amazed at what he was able to accomplish and how he just defeated them in his campaigns. And so that's why they don't tell us about the Aksum Empire. That's why they don't tell us about the other empires that flourished throughout Africa, some of whom actively resisted and refused to participate with the Europeans in the transatlantic slave trade, but we never hear about them.
And by being cut off, disconnected, strategically disconnected from our own history, we are just led to believe that there was nothing and that we didn't come from anything. And so we don't see a connection back to. And it's almost, I would even describe it, I don't mean to be dramatic here, today, but it's almost as if Sankofa has been decapitated. But we know that that is not true.
As if Sankofa had been decapitated. Well, if it's to be, if Sankofa is to be alive, to be thriving, to be, it will exist within our own hearts, our own collective mind. We have got to be the ones responsible, able to keep Sankofa as a high priority within our lives across our African world. It's not going to be an easy task, my brothers. This is going to be a monumental task, rebuilding the whole of what we have claimed to have accomplished across our many times. We know these claims are backed by a significant body of the tangible, objective evidence. But, to just claim it in the face of a world that's working so hard to take that possibility away from us, this is not going to be easy, my brothers. Sankofa, I see, Baba Juniors, you had to grab the Sankofa bird off of the shelf and hold it in your hand. Talk to us about that symbol, that icon, Brother Baba Juniors.
This is an icon. And what it talks about is the continuum. Time is not a real construct. It's a man-made construct, but this is a continuum. So you have the picture of the bird, the image of the bird, head back with an egg in its beak. The egg represents the potential, the future potential of going forward, but the head backward represents, and coming out of the body represents our history, understanding what we've been through, what we've accomplished, and taking that and including it in the potential to go forward. So it literally means to fetch and to bring forward, and that's what this symbolizes. Symbols and icons are very important for human consciousness and human psychology. That's why logos and symbols are so important and play such an important role. And that's why Freud was one of the main Europeans to grasp the importance of this, and how Freud and his nephew, Edward Bernays, and others use this reality to subjugate their people, and even more so to dominate us and to trick us into not being engaged in this whole process, to give it up.
Yeah, Sankofa. It is not taboo to return to the past, to retrieve that which has been lost or misplaced in order to move forward. And that Sankofa bird is a powerful icon. We can all interpret it our own ways. And I think it is incumbent upon us to do just that. I will add a couple of comments from our listeners, if you don't mind. For Africa One is joining us from the Barren Rock from the UK. She says, Hotep Mastermind Panel and Global LB Family. She did point out, like I did, the little bleeping sound, and Baba Juniors was able to correct that. Given the current assaults on the Horn of Africa, what are the prospects for the proposed East African Federation? Ooh. I wish I had better news to report right now. I wish I did, because everybody knows I've been following that really quite closely since about 2017, talking about the East African Federation, how it was forming. Right now, Kenya, the most economically sound state in the proposed East African Federation, Kenya is a effing mess on many different ways. Uganda is pretty much stable, but Uganda is kind of frozen. It can't do anything really powerful on its own because it's so deeply tied in and embedded with Kenya and with the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Donald Trump just went in and created this stabilization, we might say, and it's not the first time the stabilization between Rwanda, M23, and the DRC has been put forward. So Donald Trump's accomplishment there is nothing to be excited about. It's been done before, and it's been undone before as well. And then looking across the East African community, the other proposed states, Rwanda, Burundi. Rwanda is in pretty good shape, but again, Rwanda is kind of trapped because of its link to the DRC. Somalia is the latest member of the East African Federation. Somalia, as you pointed out at the beginning of today's program, is once again under assault. Ethiopia was proposed to be coming into the EAC later. Now Ethiopia is frozen. So I wish I could report better news for Africa One. East African Federation, as I was calling it a year or two ago, is not nearly as strong as the Confederation of Sahel States. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, when you were promoting the East African Federation and informing us about the progress it was making, my main response was we have to be able to defend it, just like we have to be able to defend, inform, and defend what's going on in the Sahel, in any place where African people are. Because anytime there's a righteous movement with self-determination, Urugu is active to try to destabilize it and undermine it. And so I suspect that a lot of this that is happening in those regions, particularly when it involves armaments, you have to ask yourself, where do they get the uniforms? Where do they get the weaponry? Where do they get the Toyota trucks, the vans, and the mechanism and the means to sustain an army aside from foraging and just vandalism and things like that? So clearly there's more to it than what we're told. And the deeper implications are they're trying to undermine every aspect of self-determination, unity, and cooperation outside of their neo-colonial and imperialist hegemony.
Queen Kashiba in the comments says, sorry, joined, one sec. She says, sorry, joined late. Do we need to read The Art of War?
Couldn't hurt.
Do we need to read The Art of War? I have it in my collection. I am not reading it right now, but I want to hear somebody else's opinion.
Personally, I would say yes, and I believe now there's even an African version. I believe there's a brother that wrote. He either Africanized it or he came up with an African set of principles. I'll have to research that in the background, but yeah, I don't think it could hurt. I definitely don't think it could hurt, and that's something that we always talk about. Amos Wilson, Baba ancestor Amos Wilson, was always very clear. We need to study military science. And that's just something we rarely talk about. I was at a gathering a couple weeks ago, and people were talking about constructing a village. And of course, I brought up Kuji Chagalia villages and handed out a couple of copies myself. And no one talked about protection, defendability. I made sure I brought it up, though, because so oftentimes our people just seem to miss that. And we think that if only we build a pyramid or another Black Wall Street, that we'll be fine. And that's just, as Baba Junius is always reminding us, that's just not the case.
I don't know whether we should collectivize to study the book, The Art of War. I understand the absolute value of the book. The problem about it is, from my perspective, Africans are so far away from being autonomous, being independent, being able to make our own weaponry. There's only two African nations, one of which claims to be in the Middle East, and that's Egypt. It's even manufacturing weaponry. Other than that, South Africa manufactures weaponry. I think Nigeria is starting to move into it, and a couple of other weapons factories around the planet. But South Africa is the only state that's now making tactical weapons that African people could even use. And it's moving so far behind what China is doing, what
Yeah.
Russia is doing, what America is doing. I mean, we're talking about just getting airplanes made, and they're talking about fifth and sixth generation stealth fighter planes, etc. So I'm wondering just to what extent do we at this time talk about war or talk
Right.
about eliminating war?
Right.
It
Right.
might be better for
Well,
all of us that Africans focus on eliminating war.
I see.
well, but even then, I mean, you still have to be able to defend yourself. My
Mm.
response to her is that this book is probably the African equivalent of The Art of War.
I see.
It's called Sankofa, the Reafricanization and the Reality of War. And I say this because it deals on the spiritual level, deals on the psychological level, it deals on the social level in terms of reestablishing the family as the root and the foundation of any viable organization. And Dwar, I think you said it's back in publishing, but I tried to get it. It's, and as you can see, mine is all falling apart. I got marks. But
let me try to push a link up for everybody in the background, because there is one place in Atlanta that is the sole distributor of this second new edition. But so let me find that in the background.
okay. So we do have our version of it that addresses our cultural, historical, and our intellectual needs and history and heritage. I think we should familiarize ourselves with it. And the drawback for me, in my assessment of it, is just too uncompromising. A lot of our people may not be willing to take such a harsh and hard stance on the reality of war. And because it clearly details, explains the war that we're in and what we have to do to, again, to game theory to avoid the zero-sum defeat.
A couple more comments have come in. Queen Mother Kashiba says, I heard that a French billionaire has purchased a large share of media in Africa. He can control a lot of media that Africans listen to and read. Is this true? This is the first time I am hearing about it. So I really can't comment. Have you heard this story before?
No, the sister always brings us some information because she's has her finger on the pulse of the global African world. And oftentimes it's new information to us. So I, for one, are totally ignorant of what she's talking about.
Here's what I see. I just pushed this up in the AI search. French billionaire Vincent Bolloré, his Canal Plus, has acquired full ownership of MultiChoice Group, the parent company of DSTV and GoTV, in a $3 billion deal. The acquisition, which includes a remaining 55% stake in Canal Plus, did not previously own, was approved by South Africa's Competitive Commission on July 23, 2025. This move could significantly reshape the continent's media landscape. So once again, Queen Mother Kashiba is right on point. Now, is there any counter move that we can imagine from any African organization that would be able to match this $3 billion purchase?
Good question.
Got me there.
Yeah, I'll pull this up for everyone to examine. But yeah, it is true. And the Frenchman who we have declared to be kind of an enemy to Africa's future, has now seemingly taken over this future with this major purchase. And I'll copy, cut, and paste that for those who want to know more about what it is that we're up against. Hey, listen.
Petey,
yes.
Off the top of your head, how many African nations either have on their own or have partnered with other entities to place communications satellites in orbit? Because in today's technology, when you're talking about communications, that seems to be one of the options.
I think I need to pull up some files before I can answer that. We did an analysis of Africa's various space-related programs probably 4 months ago. And that probably would include these kind of numbers or give us an estimate, but I can't tell you right off the top of my head. I apologize for that.
The reason I'm bringing that up is, number one, like I said, that's one of the options, and it seems to be one of the ways that they're going, because you're seeing Musk with Starlink, and there's several others who've come up with similar programs. The Israelis have something, so you know that's going to be hellish and demonic. And I'm saying all this because that's one of the things that Muammar Gaddafi wanted to do, and he openly advocated and advertised that he was going to do that, in addition to creating a gold-backed African currency, as well as providing low-cost loans or support for infrastructural development. And so quite naturally, a man with that kind of vision and those kind of resources had to be eliminated, either co-opted or eliminated in the United States. And the French did that. So that set that whole project back. And so here we are trying to deal with the growing urge for self-determination on the African continent. And we're seeing the counterinsurgency by Urugu to that. So again, just pointing out, we have to defend ourselves, defend our ideas and our initiative.
I ended up pushing up the second edition in the private chat. Perhaps that can be posted in the comments, which I don't have access to right now. And then Nation Building is the other book by Kwame and Nakua Okoto that I would also recommend. And on that site, you can buy them both as a bundle. But I believe both are now in their most recent second edition.
Appreciate that. I'm looking at it now. I appreciate it. So yeah. I will definitely keep this in mind.
I'll say.
Going forward, a few more comments have come in. Excuse me. Looking through our list, there's a interesting comment from Dwayne is in the house. He says, we need to discuss how the war between Africans and AA, presuming he means Africans in America, is getting out of hand. It's to the point where Africans are afraid to speak to us. I was at Walmart and greeted an East African, and it was like he didn't want to respond back. I cannot say that I am seeing this, so I may be not the one to address that question.
I'm seeing the opposite. I was 2 nights ago, I was in an establishment, a clearly a continental brother. I could hear him singing on the way in. He was singing in Shona, and he greeted me. I greeted him. He had a huge smile on his face, and he was picking up like a Grubhub order or an Uber Eats order, and he was doing that. One of the happiest people I've ever met in my life. And we've got to learn how to tap into that resilience, really, because I wish I had pulled him aside. I was kind of knee deep in my meal, but I wish I had pulled him aside and had a deeper conversation. But he looked at me when he came a little closer to pick up the order, and he said, "Food looks good, my brother. Food looks good. Enjoy." And I said, "Thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much, my brother. I appreciate it. Where on the continent are you from, my brother?" And of course, I was wearing a dashiki and whatnot. And he said Zimbabwe, and I said, "Ah, great Zimbabwe." And he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, you know Zimbabwe?" And I said, "Yes, I'm very familiar with Zimbabwe." And
Mm-hmm.
we just exchanged those little pleasantries. But I'm not going to make blanket statements, but personally I think that is a seed that a seed of doubt, a seed of poison that has been planted in many of our heads to keep us from building that bridge back between each other. Because Stray Godzilla 22, he calls it, there's a comment from him that says a lot of propaganda against Africans by, and looks like FBA is foundational Black Americans, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
I've never experienced or seen them treat us bad only on the internet, and I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, Baba Junius, did you want to comment on this as well?
I think it's incumbent upon us to reach out, because I've been remiss myself. There are some continental Africans that live around the corner from me, and I've never made any effort to introduce myself or to find out anything about them. I see them out and about, but again, it's incumbent upon us to build those bridges.
I
Now,
agree.
I'm sorry, real quick. I don't mean to discount Brother Gus's experience. I can't speak to that. Obviously, I wasn't there. And sure, who knows what the reasons for that was. Not everybody is going to be so happy and go lucky as the Zimbabwe Shona brother that I met. So I just want to be clear. I don't want to dismiss his personal experience, but I think by and large, it's that it's that kind of propagandic belief, that false belief that they don't want to have anything to do with us and we don't want to have anything to do with them, that creates and keeps that divide. There in Harlem, they had recruitment centers for our brothers signing up to go fight in Ethiopia, and the same thing in South Africa during, or Azania during apartheid. So yeah, I think we need to just sometimes maybe make the first step.
You
I
mentioned
will.
that recruitment. That was a major campaign. That
Yes, sir.
was a source of pride.
Mm,
There were a lot of veterans. There were a lot of nationalists who signed up and who actually went. And so that's another piece of history that the adversary withholds from us. It's another indication that we've been remiss in terms of telling our story, sharing our experiences.
I saw
Mm-hmm.
a recent clip of just that recruitment process, and there was an administrator behind the desk saying, "Will you die for the Abyssinian Empire?" And this is back in the 30s, and the guy signed his name, the brother signed his name and said, "Yes, I will put my life online for our people over there." I mean, this is like a historical clip. What happened to that consciousness that seems so common, that has been just chipped away at and eroded? That is part of the post 1968 mind control, social engineering, and replacing our Africanisms that we had retained from the continent with these Uruguayan values, these Isfetian values.
That was
Mm-hmm.
part of the energy and the idealism was a remnant of the Garvey movement.
Mm.
Uh, Even though by then Garvey had been deported and they had pretty much undermined his movement, it was still active, it was still uh, alive. And
Mhm.
so a lot of that African consciousness, and then you had the other groups that were coming online, like the Moorish Temple of America and the Nation of Islam, early forming of the Nation of Islam. So that consciousness was still there, and like you said, The adversary made it a strong point to undermine that, to make it a major thrust in terms of the menticide and the discombobulation of our people that we're seeing now. And of course, there are a lot of other factors involved, but
Right.
the results and the consequences are the same.
Mm-hmm. Few more comments, and I do see some comments are also on YouTube. So let me acknowledge those. Stray Godzilla is in the house. Salute. He says a lot of propaganda against Africans by FBA, etc. I think you mentioned this. I may have mentioned that earlier a bit, Duara. He
Mhm.
said, I've never experienced or seen them treat us bad, only on the internet. I think you did mention that point. And Queen Mother Kashiba says to Brother Dwayne, stay out of Walmart. It uses slave labor overseas and abuses the cities that it is located in because it does not treat its employees well in the U.S., making them dependent on welfare. And
Mm.
Dwayne writes back to her, that was the past, but things have changed. Yes, at one time, everything was beautiful between us, but now the ones that come over here don't want anything, nothing to do with us. And I'm just not seeing that, Brother Dwayne. I agree with Duara. It's the exact opposite from my point of view. I have on my desk right now a business card for Brother Mara Jakate, who's from Senegal. He has a beautiful, beautiful set of shops and stores here in Los Angeles. He's going to be opening a restaurant here. I'm going to go see him this afternoon, spend the afternoon with my beloved brother from Senegal. He is an incredibly wise person, and I listen very carefully for him, to what he has to say, because he teaches me.
I say, I think that's it. Is that taking that first step and humbling ourselves enough to one learn a little bit about the continent, so that you can have that interaction. And I've long, I think it was even beginning on the Falcon Forum, that if you take one step towards a brother or sister on the continent or from the continent, they will take 5 steps towards you. That
Mm-hmm.
is just built into the culture: reciprocity, friendliness, hospitality. uh that is just, and that's not to say that some people aren't going through it here, and whatnot, but by and large those interactions are hugely positive. So learn a little bit about the continent so you can meet and greet our continental family, and then also inquire, ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know the indigenous grieving process that our family traditionally held and did on the continent, because I think we
Mm-hmm.
are suffering from so much grief here. There are indigenous solutions to these things. So how does our family on the continent handle grief, and how can we model that and mimic that and bring that here as just an
Excellent point.
example?
Excellent, excellent point. Um, if you don't mind, I'd like to introduce a couple more ideas to the show today. Um, the Bill Gates Foundation has announced it's set to launch the world's first hormonal IUD in several
Mhm.
African countries,
Right.
starting from Kenya. It can prevent pregnancy for up to 8 years, offering women a long lasting and reliable birth control option. The first of its kind, the first of its kind contraception aims to make family planning easier and make accessible and more accessible for millions. Bill Gates, the adopted daddy of the global population control movement, has once again made another major announcement, of which Africa has become the center of its population activities. How do we respond to that? And please don't cuss.
I don't know if I can do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna try. I think of the word family planning, which is a Yurugu's code word for depopulation, especially of African people.
Mm-hmm.
I think informing our people, especially on the continent, as much as possible, is a start. And as I know you've done, Baba, bringing several of your books over and putting it in the hands of key people. Lynn Ngugi has a very popular channel on YouTube and some of the other streaming media platforms, or excuse me, social media platforms. Lynn Ngugi. And so I think, perhaps trying to set up a conversation with her. I believe PLO Lumumba has been on her channel. She's based out of Kenya. And she has a lot of these deep type of conversations about what the World Health Organization and Gavi and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, etc., are doing in Africa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do see her website, Lynn, Lynn, Ngugi, Ngugi, and
Correct.
I'm definitely going to lock that in. I'll make sure I subscribe to her channel, and I'm going to get in contact with her. I do have a large group of people in Kenya that I've been building with, and because Bill Gates is centering on Kenya for his activities, I'm going to center on Kenya for my anti-Bill Gates activities.
Mm-hmm. I see.
And did we talk last week about the male contraceptive that's being developed in Africa? Was that last week's conversation, or did we pick that up? Did I pick that up on my show the next day?
That might have been the next day, if memory serves correct. Baba Junius, do you remember that at all?
I don't remember us discussing that.
Yeah. Well, let me just kind of bring you up to date on it. This would have been it was the show was entitled. Oh, it was on population control, global trends, and I don't see a clash of civilizations and human reproduction was the title of the program, the clash of civilizations and human reproduction, and I did talk about the appearance on the world stage of a IUD for not IUD, but a sterility agent for men, a plug that they insert in you, and it's supposed to last for several years to plug up your Vans deferens, allowing those sperm cells to move from your testes through the Vans deferens into the what do you call it? It's the where you ejaculate out of. It's to block that tube, that little silicone plug. And to me, that is
No.
incredibly dangerous.
Well, but again, one of the things that we have to recognize that these mad scientists who work for the globalists,
Mm-hmm.
one of their tasks is to come up with ways to depopulate the world. And you mentioned Bill Gates, and I think we need to expose him for who and what he and his family are. Most of our listeners may not, and viewers may not know that Bill Gates is a second generation eugenicist. His father was hooked up with the Rockefellers through banking. They were allies. They were eugenicists. And of course, we know the Rockefellers, the Kellogg's, the Carnegies, and many of them financed Margaret Sanger. They were advocates of the laws that were passed here in this country for sterilization. What's the guy, Malthus, the guy from England?
Mm-hmm.
They were supporters and patrons of him and his people over there. Bill Gates has used his wealth and his connections, and he's only where he is because of his connections, primarily with the Rockefellers in that ilk. And he was able to do what he did and with Microsoft, and then raise billions of dollars and funnel billions of dollars into Gavi, the World Health Organization. He's one of the major funders of the World Health Organization. And when Trump defunded them in terms of supporting from the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. taxpayers, Gates upped his contributions, and this was right around the COVID psyop and depopulation campaign. So we have to view him not as some kind of humanitarian or some philanthropic capitalist like he likes to portray himself and his acolytes portray him, but view him as a threat to life. I mean, life, all life on this planet, because he's pushing mosquitoes, GMOs. He's doing the thing with mosquitoes. He's funding airborne mRNA type poisons. So clearly, he's a threat to world health. He's a threat to life on this planet as we know it, and we should not step back. We should not compromise our stance against him, because he's ruthless. And even his ex-wife was part and parcel to it, and still is. She was one of the main ones who pushed for Black people being put in the front of the line to receive the COVID kill shot. So the evidence is there. If you look at it, look for it, and then connect the dots, you see that he is the modern face of eugenics and also anti-life on this planet.
I am currently looking at a CIA declassified article from their Freedom of Information Act section, and it looks to be written by no stranger to us, Robert S. McNamara, president of the World Bank at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. This was in Cambridge, Massachusetts on April 28th, 1977. He goes on to state that short of thermonuclear war itself, population growth is the gravest issue the world faces over the decades immediately ahead. Indeed, in many ways, rampant population growth is even more dangerous than thermonuclear war, for it's intrinsically less subject to rational safeguards and less amenable to organized control. Just discovering this for the first time here. But Baba, I know you've published a couple of things written by Robert S. McNamara on population control and stuff like that, correct?
Yeah. It was a very nasty statements he had made. I think I cited them in my book, Missing Assets, as well as it was Population War, Report from the Frontline. Very important books. I have been contributing to us being able to identify, and then after identifying, be able to resist these efforts by the white man. So we're going to do the best we can, but doggone it, we're going to have to do a whole lot better, because we have a global population to protect and defend. And ultimately, should we do this correctly, should we be successful in our efforts, we then stand to be the dominant population, along with Asians, South Asians, on Mother Earth. If the South Asian population and African people can survive, thrive, and assert our authority on this planet, there is a good likelihood that we could eliminate war.
Right, and the caveat to that is if we engage in Sankofa and bring back African values, traditional African values, because life was a major focal point, the life force, good character, Ma'at, Ubuntu, all of that. If we can bring that back and incorporate that in our resistance, then things will go well. But keep in mind that Bill Gates, because of his influence, because of his money, Not only is he introducing bioweaponry and sterilization, modern sterilization, he's purchasing a lot of land in the United States, and he's part and parcel to the GMOs, and he's invested in fake meat. He's invested in other food processing modalities and technology. So he is clearly a threat. Again, I repeat, he is a threat to Black life on this planet. And that's why the people you mentioned, South Asian, the Indians literally hate him, and for what he did to them with his sterilization and population birth control, quote unquote, mechanisms.
Okay. Going forward, there's another comment here. The Ghana's defense environment ministers are among 8 killed in military helicopter crash. Of course, this is another airborne tragedy, but a crash in Ghana resulting in the death of its Minister of Defense, and there was another highly ranked environment minister as well. They were killed in the crash. All of the people killed were very prominent in the Ghanaian government. We can offer our condolences from across the water, but at the same time, could there be any question of subterfuge from Western powers in the crash of this helicopter?
You'd have to look and see what those people either personally or collectively were engaged in, what policies they were pursuing. Were they actively resisting neocolonialism? Were they actively resisting the cultural wars? Were they resisting, say, the attempts to co-opt them and compromise them?
Let me read a little bit of the story. Maybe you can deduce from that. Adansi Akroforum, Ghana. Ghana is mourning the death of 2 senior government officials and 6 others after a military helicopter crashed in the Ashanti region on Wednesday, August 6th. Defense Minister Edward Omane Boama and Environment Minister Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed were confirmed dead in the crash, with Chief of Staff Julius Debra as called a national tragedy. The incident occurred shortly after the Z-9 military helicopter took off en route to Obuasi. It reportedly went off radar minutes into the flight. Emergency teams are still at the crash site and investigations continue. Among other victims, Alhaji Muniru Mohammed, Acting Deputy Secretary, National Secretary Coordinator. So these are all very important people. Vice Chairman of the National Democratic Congress, Dr. Samuel Sarpong, and others. And the question would arise, who is the manufacturer of the Z-9 military helicopter? I don't know the answer to that. I should know in a second. Does anybody know who would be the manufacturer of that military helicopter?
No, I do not.
Now, what they were traveling for, what purpose?
It's a Chinese military utility helicopter. So they were traveling. That's interesting too, because there is now a new arms race between the West and China. And we wonder, could it be possible that Ghana was making arms deals with China, and that the sinking or the crash of this helicopter could have been related to that?
Well,
and the question you asked, where were they headed? Is that was the question you asked?
Well, yeah. For what purpose were they traveling?
Okay, I'll have that in a second. And
but you raised that. Why are you looking for that? You raised that issue. The world saw quite clearly on 2 events the dust up between India and Pakistan. The Pakistanis were using Chinese 5th, maybe 6th generation fighters and armaments and the Indians were mainly using Western weaponry. The Pakistanis just literally destroyed them in the dogfights. Their jets performed far superior to the Western. We've also seen some situations in that so-called 12-day war with Iran and Israel. We've seen some implications of non-Western weaponry used in that. Mainly, a lot of it was done by the Iranians themselves, but they've also imported other technologies from other sovereign nations and to be used in their military. So you're absolutely right. There is this competition, and as we've said for many years, particularly in the Falcon Forum and now, the American weapons and the Western weapons, French and UK, they just can't hold up. They can't hold up to the Chinese, and they can't hold up to the Russians.
Mm-hmm. I have this story is from October 2015. Ghana receives Z9 helicopters. The aircraft were commissioned by President John Dramani Mahama on 23rd of September at Burma Camp in Accra, in a ceremony attended by 300 people, including representatives from the armed forces, the oil and gas industry. Mahama said the aircraft manufactured by Harbin in China would be used to police the Ghana gas project, as well as other oil infrastructure, and the aircraft would be used to secure offshore oil installations, enhance maritime security and anti-piracy, conduct medical evacuations, as well as search and rescue. So I don't know how many of these airplanes or these helicopters that Ghana had in its force, but we do know that if they only had the 4, one of them now is out.
Well, again, what the question is, the time frame. What was the purpose of their trips? Were they collectively engaged in some negotiations? And what type of business were they involved in? And it's the old follow the money, follow the deals, follow the transactions.
Yeah, and of course, time does not allow us right now to do that type of research online, but we put it out here. That's our purpose as an African media outlet, to put it out here. And should some of our listeners be paying attention, they might be able to find the answer to these questions. It was on its way from the Kotoka International Airport, that's in Accra, and it was headed toward the Obuasi Airport, private airport serving the town of Obuasi in the Obuasi Municipal District of the Ashanti region. So we'll know more about that in the future. And it said President John Mahama had originally been scheduled to attend the event, but instead delegated the ministers to represent him due to a concurrent occasion. So it sounds from this Wikipedia coverage of it that had the ministers, that had not he had been canceled his flight, President John Mahama may have been on that helicopter as well.
Right. We saw a similar situation with some representatives from Sudan, where they were trying to resolve that conflict, and a result of their murder, or I won't say murder, but the tragedy there, things spiraled out of control, and then Sudan was split in half. There was something very similar with Rwanda and I think Uganda, when they were trying to resolve some of the situations in the Congo. We've seen it here in the United States, where they even pretty much admit that they killed Senator Wellstone. CIA pretty much killed Senator Wellstone. So that's a tactic that the adversaries, with the Hakimata Booty called the enemies of humanity, enemies of the world, use quite often.
Mm-hmm. Um, did you have any thoughts on this, Brother Dwyer?
No, not necessarily. Like you said, Baba, we'll find out more hopefully in the future. I'm still kind of stuck on the doing some research in the background on the population stuff. I've just found a couple of very interesting things that are linking high social media usage to lowered fertility rates on the continent specifically.
That's interesting. What's the link there?
I just put that up in the private chat. It's from onlinelibrary.wiley.com. That's the
I mean,
PDF.
yeah.
Oh,
What
I'm
is the
sorry.
link between the high social
Oh,
media use and lowered
sorry.
fertility? Is it psychological, cultural, or is it biological?
That's a great point. I'm just reading the abstract here. It says we find higher social media usage and gender equality in social media usage to be associated with lower birth rates. This studies is one of the first to demonstrate connections between social media usage and fertility outcomes in the sub-Saharan African region. Excuse me, sub-Saharan African region. So really in doing some of this research in the background, it's almost like Yurugu is looking for every and any attempt to try to subvert clearly African fertility rates. And there's another article which is talking about um, this one brother who is supposedly in Nigeria complaining that his wife is not interested, that one of his wives is not interested in birth control, and he's trying to advocate it. And the article literally goes on to say that he blames his wife's circle of friends and their influence on her for not wanting her to have an IUD. And so this is the type of propaganda that we're up against, and feminism and all of that is a huge um, bullet that they cast towards the motherland continent. And then we know the book Target Africa talks about that: promiscuity, feminism, LGBT, homosexuality, and now transgender and all that. All of that is being lauded, as Baba Junius has talked to us about before, and you have as well, Baba Kiti. All of that is being used. They're throwing everything at African fertility at this point.
Just to
Mm.
dovetail on what you're saying, many of these conferences, these American and African conferences, where they talk about trade and they talk about bilateral agreements, included in their agenda is the very things that you just mentioned, where they want to entice or induce Africans to compromise their values, accept Western values of depopulation, minimize births, fertility, and to embrace the cultural depravity of the West. So all this stuff is going on, and it's directed at our people. Excuse me.
Yeah, that article I just referenced as well, fertility rates and social media usage in sub-Saharan Africa, from Wiley, which I guess is like an academic publishing institution. They are also saying that the link between traditional media and fertility behavior has been firmly established. And that's bringing me straight to a New York Times article: how a TV hit sparked debate about birth rates in Africa. And Baba Kiti, you mentioned several years ago now how Brazil had their fertility rates drastically reduced due to the telenovelas that were portraying
Mm-hmm.
having children as being a burden, or not featuring children at all. And then we look at some of the shows that we have here, like back in the day, there was that show Girlfriends and Living Single, and there were no children in any of those shows. That's the predictive programming
That's
that
right.
Baba
That
Jr.
is true.
warns us about.
But again, that comes
Yeah.
the African culture, African cosmology. Procreation is sacred because that is the way the Creator replicates itself. And so when we're looking at these programs from the Gateses and the Rockefellers and the Sangers, it comes down to it. It's anti-life and it's anti-values. It goes against the African cultural values of the sacredness of life. Because in traditional Africa, birthing many children was considered a blessing, was considered an obligation. These people are opposed to life on all levels, whether it's through war or through just their depravity with these alternative life, so-called alternative lifestyles, death styles.
Right.
So the methods are different, but the results are the same: a lowered population.
Mm-hmm. Going forward, a few more comments have come in. For Africa One, what's going on with our African leadership? Have they no idea as to what the likes of Bill Gates are about and what they did in India? You mentioned India and Bill Gates' activities, and apparently, no. Our African leadership apparently knows a lot less about it than many of us do. So maybe it is incumbent upon those of us who are aware of what's going on there to step up our game, to do the best we can to inform our African leadership. This is why I write the books.
Mm-hmm.
I write the books so what I have been studying can now be taken on by whomever would want to take on that issue. The problem is, and this is embarrassing to have to admit this, my Amazon book sales stopped wholly and completely. I don't know if it was a conspiracy or if nobody is clicking on my links on Amazon to where there are 46 or so books up for sale. But over a month ago, I sold my last books on Amazon. Over a month ago. It was to the point that my Amazon book sales had reached over $300 a month.
Mm.
Now it's zero.
Well, that,
I get a little bit of residue from people reading the Kindle pages, but doesn't even begin to compare.
We discussed this last week. Like I said, they don't have to kill you. They don't have to do to you what they did to William Monroe Trotter. And I believe they threw him off the roof. They don't have to do to you what they did to the sister from Memphis. Ran her out of, destroyed her printing press and ran her out of town, threatened her life. All they have to do is shadow ban you. All they have to do is demonetize you, which they have done. All they have to do is deplatform you, which they have done. So again, we have to fully embrace the fact that we are in a war, we're in a conflict, and they will stoop at nothing to minimize the competition. They don't have to kill us. That's how. And when you get to where they want to go with the social credit score, if you're non-compliant, they just shut you off. They shut the chip down, or they shut your card down, or whatever, even for something like jaywalking, because that's what they're doing in China. That's the Chinese social credit scores and that surveillance. They want to bring that to the West.
mm-hmm.
That will be the ultimate, because just to have the audacity to have this platform and to have this show, they will shut your card down.
Mm-hmm. Whew.
I personally,
You were saying?
I personally don't think, back to the brother's question, I personally don't think it's all African leaders. And I personally and respectfully feel that there are, of the ones that are corrupt or what have you, that they do know what Bill Gates is up to, and Gavi, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum. Many of, well, I don't want to say many of them. Some of them have been bought off, though.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the president of Gabon, they found duffel bags filled with U.S. currency. They were bringing him a bag once a month, perhaps.
Wow.
Keep in mind the coincidence back during the COVID PSYOP, the depopulation campaign. There were at least 5 leaders on the continent and in the Caribbean who were vocal in their opposition to that. And just so happens coincidentally, some of them died.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of us is going to make a transition. And they have reduced us to the point where they try to distract us from the damage that the COVID poisons are doing. But even Europeans, I mean, Catherine Austin Fitts made John Magufuli a hero on her platform because of what he did, how he stood up and even mocked them,
right?
Because he was a scientist and he knew better, and just mocked them in front of the whole world. And as Duara said in the early part of the show, when you do that, you demonstrate that kind of courage and you defeat them or you make them look silly, you become persona non grata, and they hate you and they hate your descendants ad infinitum.
Mm-hmm. Ashe.
We, the Gabon story you mentioned, recent developments on bribery in Gabon. I was just looking for more evidence on that. There have been ongoing concerns regarding corruption in Gabon, particularly in relation to foreign interactions, including those involving the U.S. government.
Oh,
the Corruptions Perception Index, CPI. The Corruptions Perception Index for 2024 indicates that Gabon scored 25 out of 100, 135th of 180 nations, highlighting significant issues with corruption in the country.
I mean, just to shift away from our people, where does the United States rank on that list?
That's a good question.
Yeah, 1 second. I'm going to answer one question. And how does the U.S. rank on that corruption list? How does the U.S. Come on. How does the U.S. list on the corruptions index? And I'll have that answered for you in just a second. The U.S. listing on a corruptions index is 73 out of 100. Now, U.S. can corrupt all of these other nations, but U.S. doesn't rank high in corruption. Or 73 out of 100. I can't tell. Is the index low is a good number and high is a bad number, or high is bad, low is I need to know more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the U.S. is corrupting all these other governments and it ranks high on this list, then that means U.S. is corrupt.
Yeah, but I mean, most of us recognize that corruption has been endemic in this country since its inception. So their propaganda is to dupe us into believing this is the greatest system that has ever been foisted on mankind, the greatest civilization in the history of humanity. We all know that's not true.
That's right. So to clarify, the Corruption Perception Index, CPI, is a measure that ranks countries based on how corrupt their government sector is perceived to be. The index is published annually by Transparency International and uses a scale of 0, which is highly corrupt, to 100, meaning very clean. So the USA is closer, much closer to being completely clean than Gabon, which is receiving the corruption from the United States and is ranked as very corrupt. Yeah,
But that's consistent to the double standard that they use.
that's right. Mm-hmm.
You know, so you raise the issue as how can the corruptors, those people who are setting folks up for corruption, not be listed, and the people who take the bribes or take the inducements, they're listed as most corrupt. What's that? When the police do a sting, what's that called? I know the
Entrapment.
entrapment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, see, you have a classic, not so much entrapment, but the goal is to corrupt and to compromise people, and somehow those doing it are not culpable. You know, so it just shows you. We see this playing out with the Epstein situation.
That's right. Woof. This is an exhausting show. We're gonna get through it. We're gonna get through it. Couple more comments have come in, if you don't mind. Ed L. Mack is in the house. Greetings to the family. Sounds if they are Americanizing the homeland even more. African American youth are finding it very hard to commit to each other. It seems to think like it's social media AI. And yeah, we did cover that whole topic, and I think you are right. Let me see if there's another statement. Anybody on YouTube is not responding. Stray Godzilla asked this question: shouldn't Africa create a universal culture? That's a very interesting question. Shouldn't Africa create a universal culture, whereas at the end of colonization, I believe there were as many as 1,200 distinctions in African cultures. So should 55 nations attempt to homogenize their culture?
Well, Cheikh Anta Diop published a book called the cultural
unity of African, unity of African culture.
Right, and it wasn't as big as some of the volumes that he's published, but he and several other people have suggested there are similarities between various ethnic and cultural groupings, the values. You can see the value of Ubuntu. You can see the values of Ma'at. You can see some of the other spiritual values. They just have different names. So I wouldn't say it's universal, but there were very similar ideas. And as T.D. mentioned, with colonization and even the so-called liberation, most of the liberators were educated by the colonizers, and we know what that means. So so you have someone, and I'll give you an example, and this is not to bash Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu was one of the persons who introduced the concept of Ubuntu to the West. And when you listen to him, yes, he tells us what it is in a nutshell, but it's so vague and it does not fully embrace or emphasize what it really means, the fullness of the concept of Ubuntu. And that's because he's been brainwashed. He's an Anglican priest, you know. So he's been Europeanized.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Baba.
I was just about to say something that slipped through my head. I'll wait till
Sorry
you finish your
about
statement.
that. No, I forgot mine as well. I forgot mine. Well, actually, no. I think I got it back now. And please cut me off if you think of yours, okay?
Okay.
I think that we do have a universal African culture.
That's right.
It may not be named. I think Sheikh Anta Diop did probably as good a job as any of highlighting these universal Africanisms. I'm constantly reminding people locally that it's kind of like a trinity. There is decolonization, but you can't just remove something from somebody. You got to give them something else in its place, or there'll be a void. So there's decolonization, and then in its place, after you remove the poison, then you have re-Africanization, and then from there it's pan-Africanization in my mind, and that's the reminder of what LIB has always stood for, and that we are a global African family, and those Africanisms between us, although in some diasporic places are rapidly eroding and have been eroding for quite some time now, but there are Africanisms that link all of us. And so in that sense, I would argue that there is a universal African or Pan-African culture. It's just we may not be able to point out the exact examples of how we are all linked. But I mean, even just taking the category of food, we can
Mm-hmm.
see that there is a continuity between all African people around the world in how we season our food, in the type of foods that we eat. And again, in certain places, especially in the diaspora, that is being eroded. So I want to be clear that it's that universal culture is under attack, as Baba Junius mentioned. War is being waged on it and upon it. But yeah, that's my stance on that.
Yeah. Brother Juma in the comment put in the word Pan Africanism, one ideology translated into a cultural commonality. And I would say that that is probably the best answer to Stray Godzilla's question that I would relate, that go with Pan Africanism and then fill in the gaps, bridge the gaps. When we look at the word culture, we have to understand culture is a very powerful element. And at this particular point, universalizing Africa's culture, how are you going to universalize indigenous African spirituality, which would go back to Kemet and the Voodoo and the Ile Afe, Ile Afe, excuse me if I'm Ile Ife, and universalizing that with Western Christianity, with Arabic Islam, and these other intruders, you're going to have a hard time getting those reconciled. Languages, Africa, culture is, I wrote the book, Moving Beyond Racism, New Strategies for a New Millennium. And in that book, I defined to the best of my abilities, what is culture? Culture is, number one, your language. What is your name? What language do you speak? Culture is your spirituality. Religion. What God do you pray to? Culture is your traditions. What did you do on the 4th of July, or the farce called July? So culture has these 6 axioms. Culture is your historical perspective. You can share a common history with another country, but belong to 2 different cultures and view them completely different. Culture is your morality and your value system, and also culture is your logic, your means, your way of thinking. When we're talking about universalizing something across the African continent that is so diverse, I don't know if that should be a priority for us. Meanwhile, we do have some things that could forward the universalization of African culture, such as the African Continental Trade Agreement, the use of Swahili now taught in universities across 26 African countries. These things will begin to move us forward. I say they will be coming not under the banner of universalizing a culture, but under the banner of Pan-Africanism. So I agree with Brother Juma. One ideology translated into cultural commonalities.
I say.
Well, one thing, when we talk about culture, a lot of people overlook the fact that culture has 2 parts. There's a non-material part and there's a material part. Material part, you can look at somebody, okay, well, look at how they dye their clothes, or look at how
That's
they
right.
make their clothing, what kind of shoes they put on their feet, what type of architecture they use. The non-material is about the metaphysics, the philosophy, the values. And so I think we need to focus more on the non-material. Look at the similarities in the non-material aspects of culture throughout the continent as well as diaspora, and then make the linkages and see the similarities and disparate ways that these cultures line up. When we talk about language, language reflects our consciousness. It's a part of the culture that reflects the values and our experiences. So when you look at, just say, English or the Anglo or Germanic use of language, it reflects their consciousness. When you look at African people, so we say talk about Hotep, that's a greeting. Or they talked about peace as a way of life, as a status and a goal, versus looking at the English language, how much violence and war we incorporate and include in our everyday language. You see the ads, these lawyer ads, I'm fighting for you, but this is a battle. It's all about conflict. It's never about peace. And so that reflects their consciousness. That's the whole mindset, the ethos of Urugu.
Right. It's two other examples that I always bring up, and I thank you for bringing that up, Baba Junius, is I'm aiming to get this done, and hey, do me a favor and shoot me a text. Why would you want to shoot somebody? Something.
Yeah, the language. That's what they call it, idiosyncrasies of the different languages. Yeah, Western languages have these corrupting elements in them that we just take them for granted, but not knowing how language does impact our ultimate psychology. That is very important aspect of culture. Couple comments. Brother Juma wrote, that meaning that your woman won't wear blonde hair either. And I know Brother Juma, he's always very persistent, very insistent that the adoption of westernized consumer and fashion trends appears to be very contradictory to our Africanness. It's hard for me to come down real hard on Black women who do dye their hair blonde. I think it's absurd, but I keep quiet about it, because if we look at African women around the world, we have all kind of hairstyles, and we do have indigenous blonde Africans across the Australo-Melanesian people who are, of course, in the Pacific region. And we have African women. Nigeria, they seem to be taking up the kind of commercialization of their hair nowadays, and everybody's got extensions, etc. You have women in Uganda who wear their hair very closely cropped to the scalp, whereas almost would be like a man's hair. You have women who weave mud into their hair, so the hair becomes red.
It's red. Red is brown.
Ochre. It's
the Himba.
The Himba. And they're beautiful women, absolutely beautiful. So I know Juma would never reject a Himba woman with her beautiful red hair coming at him. He would never reject that. But I will say this much: insofar as hair, I'm doing the best I can to back away from a woman determines her hair. And it's not necessarily determined what her hair says, but what's inside of her head, what comes out of her mouth.
I believe it was Omawali Malik Shabazz, otherwise known as Malcolm X, Baba ancestor Malcolm X, who said, if we paid as much attention to our brains as we do our hair, we would be a lot better off as a people.
Yeah. And eventually we will get around to the hair. I think a lot of it has to do with identity. Black people are still out here fishing around for who am I, what do I look like, who do I belong, what language do I speak. We're still searching for that identity.
And you know, looking at I'm sorry, real quick, looking at the three of us, and I know you can't see me, but you know, there's gonna be some people that are saying, oh, of course they're hating on hair. None of them have any. I'm right there with you, Babas. You know,
Well,
we all have the same barber.
Yeah.
well, my hair is just grown from the north. It moves south for the winter.
There you go.
Yeah.
I say.
Or moves into your ears and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I say.
But
yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the hair thing. African people have always been creative, and adornment was not just style for us. It was used to demonstrate and to advertise that person's status in society. So a woman's hairstyle might reflect her status as, say, an elder, or a girl who's just coming out of rites of passage into womanhood, and she might wear her hair a certain way or wear certain adornments. So it wasn't just willy-nilly or random. They all had significance, and you had to be a member of the in-group to understand what that group, with the adornment meant. And I think because we're so superficial, because we're taught to be superficial by the people who brainwashed us, we don't look at the deep level with the brother, he called it African deep thought.
Jacob
brother, brother Carruthers, yeah. We haven't gotten to the point where we appreciate that, the deepness and the profundity of Africans, and just on a everyday bland level, how deep we are and were.
Yeah. And to the contrary of what you're speaking, and I do agree with you completely. I think when it comes to African deep thought, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, praise be his eternal name, needs to be front and foremost within our minds when we think about these things. But the contrary to that is what Queen Mother Kashiba writes: can hip-hop culture convey those aspects of Pan-Africanism? So many of our youth and adults seem addicted to it. What makes it so addicted to Black males? And I agree. If we're looking at deep thought, Pan-Africanism, the exact opposite of that might be, doesn't have to be, but it might be conveyed under this popularized African-American cultural paradigm called hip-hop culture.
Well, remember early on, in addition to getting away from the trends in American music, disco and things like that, hip hop came out, and there were some very conscious artists in hip hop.
They were right. They were the dominant ones at one point.
Right, and there was a whole segment of these conscious artists, and the people who were the profiteers saw that. They saw that they actually were selling their tapes and albums and what have you, and then they began to undermine it with the gangster rap and the sex worker videos and things like that. So she's absolutely right. There is a place for that. It's natural because it has the rhythm, and we're a rhythmic people. And when you look at African rituals and traditions and ceremonies, music was an integral part of that. And so was the beat and the rhythm and that whole trance mechanism, so that positive values and language and images could be implemented into the subconscious. Our adversaries have taken that and they've turned it against us, and they're using it against us.
That's right. And the adversary saw the power, the potential of it long before most of our people saw the power and the potential of it. You are so accurate. I wrote the book, Rap, Hip Hop, and the New World Order. Most of our listening audience knows about that at this particular point. And the book, Rap, Hip Hop, and the New World Order, pointed out this contradiction that these artists were serving. Tupac himself was a walking contradiction. Tupac was at war successfully against himself. On one hand, he was the son of the Panther movement. And I met with a group of Panthers in Alabama who, for some time, when Tupac was kind of hiding out, they used to school him. And their location was in Birmingham, I would call it, Alabama. And they talked about how Tupac, when he was around them, he was a perfect student, an absolute perfect student. But they said as soon as he left Alabama and went back to New York, within days, within weeks, they would hear more of this foolishness and this nonsense, this chaos coming out of his mouth. So I think it stands as kind of Tupac is a prime example of how the potential of this community was hijacked by external forces. And in the book, Rap, Hip Hop, and the New World Order, I do the best I can to name those forces, whether they be Luciferian, satanic, FBI, lawyers, or media capital Jews who were head of these media organizations. I name the names and do the best I can. But we're still at war, and we're losing another generation to this same conspiracy that arose to hijack hip hop in the early 1980s.
When I was an educator, I would inquire with our young brothers, our youth, why they listened to what they listened to. This trill and drill. Those are some of kind of the newer Gen Z hip hop styles and music types right now, and a lot of it is wholly centered on gang culture, materialism, promiscuity, drug use and abuse. And the answer I would get the most is that that's my culture. And it dawned on me that, exactly like you said, Baba Kitty, that we've been hijacked, and instead of our original true African culture, that has been stripped from us, and we've been given this manufactured poisonous culture from our enemy, from our historical adversary. And we are now led to believe that that is our culture.
Because we have not educated our young people, or even our peers, what culture really is, what it entails, the breadth and depth of it. We just think, again, a lot of times we see the material part of it.
Right.
Or we'll see that in between part, the music part of it. Or we'll see some other aspect of it and say this is culture, but not get at the fact that culture, for us, the same root of cultivation is culture. The role of culture for a civilized people is to cultivate their people and help them move into their highest potential and possibilities. That's not what we're seeing here with this stuff. They're using it to keep us down. They using it to keep us on the lowest level possible.
Yeah, that low vibrational energy, weaponizing our drums against us.
But not to, you mentioned the vibration. It's the sound, but it's also the emotional vibration. They want our people to resonate on that dense, low vibratory level. And we can see it with the chaos and the just depravity that's happening in our community with the mental illness.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. Real quick story. I used to do a lot of security in different, venues and stuff like that. There was a song by Cardi B called Red Bottoms, and it was a very like intense song. And if you listen to the beat pattern, the drum pattern in the song, every single time that song would come on, there would always break out at least one or two fights. And people, I myself found myself being affected by it, and my brow getting furrowed, and just being taken over by these negative, low vibrational emotions. And I came to the conclusion, and I swear by this today, that song, the beat pad, the drum pattern in that song is such that it evokes a sort of violence in you.
Wow.
Yeah, they know what they're doing, and they encourage it. And unfortunately, the so-called artists are going along with it, but they don't know the impact of, or they don't know the science of what they're doing.
Right.
How it impacts.
Exactly.
Well, we're here to teach them. That is our purpose here from LIB Radio. The problem is that we are being starved out by a deliberate, according to Baba Junius's testimony, and I agree, by a deliberate process that has identified LIB Radio as an enemy of their self-interest, be they the population reducers self-interest, be they the consumerisms producers, because really they still want to just convince us, don't worry about all that. Just go get you some new shoes, get you the latest car, get you some in debt, get you whatever, consume your way to be content and satisfied throughout this next phase of human social evolution. So we're rising saying, no, don't do that, and do this instead. Get yourself healthy. Keep yourself healthy. Keep yourself out of the grip of the medical pharmaceutical drug cartel. And now you have, if you want to consume, now you have 80% more money to consume with. If you're my age 70, or Baba Junius is age 74, I believe you are.
No, I'm 77.
77, you don't look a day over 64, Baba Junius, and that's a compliment. But get yourself out of this consumerism and get yourself out of this healthcare tragedy and live long and thrive. And if you want to consume with it, fine. But if you want to compete for the future, that is even better, because now we're doing it for our children, our children. We want to convey all of these attitudes. I put it in the books, and I am not selling not one book this week on Amazon. And that's quite a tragedy. What can we do? This is August right now. We're having an emergency fund drive. And I don't know if people hear when they hear emergency, but I think that people need to be more responsive if they truly believe in our LIB radio mission, our Pan-African mission.
Well, a rhyming word, you say emergency, there should be a sense of urgency. Just in terms of survival. Because we've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks. These are not shameless plugs. I mean, Duara, myself, Keedy, we don't get paid to do this. It is a part of our destiny, is part of something that we were put on this planet in this particular time and place to accomplish. But we need support. Ubuntu, we need your support. We need you to rally around and see LIB radio for the asset that it is. And ask yourself, if we were just clowning around, why would the powers that be exert so much energy and so much deviousness and devilment in keeping us out from the larger spaces? Because we are being shadow ban. Yes, it's out there, but the algorithms are suppressing a lot of what we do. And then you ask yourself, how can some of these clowns who do what they do, and how they promote depravity and uh,
Mhm.
just foolishness, how can they prosper and how are they rich? It's because of the consciousness. And our job is to overcome that. Our job is to transcend that. Our job is to raise us up. Muslims, we used to talk about raising Black Muslims, Nation of Islam, we used to talk about raising a nation. Other groups will talk about raising consciousness. That's what we're doing. That's our attempt. It's not about self-aggrandizement. It's not about profiting, even in a capitalistic, profit-driven culture. This runs counter to what we're making major sacrifices here.
Mhm.
So we're asking for the vibration of Ubuntu, the resonance of Ubuntu, because that's what it's about.
I say, yeah, I second that. And it really you vote with your wallet, and you spend money on what is valuable to you. For some people, it's going to be uh, things that offer very little return on their value. LIB has been going strong for this long. It is our primary news outlet in many cases. I know throughout the years, any and every time there was a world shaking situation or a national shaking situation, I knew I could rely on LIB and to tune into Baba Kiti to get the truth, to get that alternative perspective, to get that African perspective, and it's been life saving. So that's why I continue to support it. And just to dovetail on what both of these wonderful Jegne Babas have said, let's keep this alive. Let us definitely continue to put our money where our mouth is, and see this as the valuable and priceless resource that it is. Ashe.
Again, Duar talked about, you mentioned the word news. This is greater than news. We're not just reading copy.
Thank
We're
you.
not like the people on News Nation, CNN, the local television stations that are just reading pre-designed copy that when you put it up side by side in various markets, it's the same thing. There's really no diversity. We're offering information and analysis. Are we saying we know it all? Of course not. But what we are saying is we have invested the time, again, the sacrifice, to bring this information to you and filter it through a perspective that has the best interest of our people at heart. ABC, Disney, Universal, Comcast, they can't say, they do not have our best interest at heart. Because if they did, half the filth that they put out there wouldn't be out there.
I say. I say.
Queen Mother Kashiba asks to once more, please repeat the book, Baba Junius. I guess you had mentioned earlier the book, I think, the Sankofa movement. And I did find the link. Dwara had actually shared the link to the updated version of the book, and I just pasted that in the link as well. So we do invite people, please do get your copy of the Sankofa movement. It's very, very important that we are up on this. And I'm just going to put that link
And
also.
the subtitle is Re-Africanization and the Reality of War. Because our initial question was, should we have an art of, should we read or should we have an art of war? This is that from an African perspective.
I see.
Yeah, very, very clear. We're nearing the end of the show today. Are there any other topics that we do need to be covering here before we move forward?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about something that would impact a lot of us. There's a report that the Social Security trust funds are projected to run out about 6 months earlier than previously estimated. The old age and survivors insurance and the disability insurance funds are now anticipated to be depleted in the first quarter of 2034. So a lot of younger people can look forward to that and plan for that, because that's going to be a major issue. Trump's one big beautiful act accelerates the timeline by 6 months. So they're being forced to change. Now keep in mind that what he just did to the lady in charge of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and as we mentioned before, they always had problems with the numbers. But that's a whole nother piece. And then the other key factor is the FDA orders the COVID injection makers, Pfizer and Moderna, to warn the public about the risks of heart damage. I mean, it's bad enough when you see those things on TV and the small print.
Right.
They would have to have supplemental pieces attached to them.
Right. Yeah.
The risks that they
maybe even a booklet.
Yeah. And the last thing, watch for Zelensky and NATO to try to sabotage this so-called upcoming meeting in Alaska between Trump and Putin.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because Trump is now openly advocating for a Nobel Peace Prize. He is claiming that the deal in the DRC is his deal and is causing peace. We do know DRC has been close to peace many times before and then been undermined by whom? Yeah, United States. The end of the fighting between Thailand and Cambodia, which was just a flash, Trump is claiming credit for that.
Right.
Avoiding a major conflict between India and Pakistan, we believe, it appears to me that Trump is claiming credit for that.
Well, he can't claim credit for that.
Okay. And the possibility of Israel stopping the violence against the Palestinians, Trump will be claiming credit for that as well. Stopping a war between Israel and Iran, he's claiming credit for that. So does anybody have a problem with Trump openly fishing for a Nobel Peace Prize if the consequences might be we're closer to peace on this planet?
Well, but you have to have the results. In other words, we've been conditioned. They gave Barack Obama the Nobel Peace Prize, and he did absolutely nothing. Hadn't even been in office that long and did absolutely nothing. And he was expanding the wars that his predecessors had started. So that's the template.
That's the precedent, sir.
Yeah, that's the precedent. So when there's peace in Ukraine, and like I said, NATO and Zelensky, and there are people behind the scenes trying to sabotage that, you can't say on one hand we want to turn Gaza into a similar Riviera type situation and then say peace, because you're talking about ethnic cleansing and genocide. He's even challenging people about the starvation issues, even though he's started to come around and say, yeah, well, there might be some issues with the aid. So no, I think it's part of his ego. He wants to be recognized for something. Plus, he did all that bragging and boasting and stuff, and he hasn't pulled off a whole lot since he's been in. So quite naturally, with his ego, he's going to push that. He's only had a handful of major trade deals. People are looking at him like he's crazy about that, how he's using tariffs for means that really tariffs aren't designed for. And it becomes just part of his ego and his bombast and his bluster. Because at the same time, he's threatening people with war. 2 weeks ago, didn't he threaten Russia with sanctions? sanctions are economic warfare.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And Ethiopia is hinting that it's now resuming a position it had about 4 years ago, where it feels threatened. And it said the old players, and by saying that old players, we do know the United States was one of the countries that was undermining Ethiopian sovereignty by pushing that Tigray People's Liberation Front out there as an instrument to attack the Ethiopian state and bring down the prestige that was being offered to Ethiopia's President Abiy Ahmed, or Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. So I agree, it's a phony peace. Yet at the same time, I will say this much. If Donald Trump can actually cause peace around the world, and don't overlook the Sudanese crisis, the major crisis on the planet right now, don't overlook that and claim you're creating peace on this planet. This is not happening. But if he does get peace, then give him his price.
Well, but again, yes, look at the results, but also look at the motivation and the incentive. It's not out of altruism or love for humanity. It's not a philanthropic type of situation, love of humanity. He wants to make deals, and deals that will benefit him and his family more so than the United States or the world.
Mm-hmm. And Queen Mother Kashiba writing on that. This is the last comment I'll share for today's program. Can Trump fire Norway if he doesn't receive it? Ha ha ha. And he can't fire the Nobel Peace Committee. Let it be. Let it ride. Let it ride. You were saying?
No, I was just gonna say it all makes sense to me when we realized that Alfred Nobel, whom the prize is named after, invented dynamite and a gelatin explosive, and I think there's another one even, which is like a smokeless explosive. I mean, so at the end of the day, their playbook is thin, as Baba Junior always reminds us.
And keep in mind, not only that did he invent TNT, because the Chinese had dynamite hundreds of thousands of years before that.
The fire stick, sure.
He was trying to change his image.
That's right.
Give you the history of that. He read either his brother died or somebody died, and they said it was him. Alfred died, and they blasted him for his greed and his business acumen, the negativity, and so he said, wow, I really don't want to go out like that. So he came up with all these prizes to change his image. And he's not the only one. The Rockefellers did, John D. Rockefeller did it. So many others who are really Luciferian demons.
Yes.
Just hired PR people to change their image.
No, that is so true.
Mm-hmm.
The two quotes real quick, supposedly from the obituary, stated the merchant of death is dead, and the other one said Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill people more faster than ever before, died yesterday.
That's right. Goodness. So putting it all in context, maybe Trump does deserve a Nobel Peace Prize.
Right.
Yeah, fake Peace Prize. I'm going to close with this story. I think it's important for the advance of science and engineering. This story is from Norway, dated August 7, 2025. Norway scientists use microbes to make biomethane from carbon dioxide with 86% purity. Researchers use unconventional substrates like plastic waste and woody biomass in their biomethane production process. Now, from my perspective as a Pan-African who wants to take science home with me from the West when I go to Africa, I think that this is one of those scientific inquiries that I want to know much more about the use of carbon-based gases such as carbon dioxide, CO2, and carbon monoxide, CO, to turn them into biomethane, a green and sustainable alternative to natural gas. Your thought?
Well, a lot of things, even if it's true, keep in mind a lot of great ideas and inventions and processes have been suppressed because they're a threat to the status quo. They're a threat to the petroleum industry. They're a threat to liquefied natural gas people. So even if that is true, you have to keep an eye out for the progress and the investments in it to make it viable and feasible. Because they will shelf it, they will buy it or create so much red tape that it never sees the light of day.
Mm-hmm. But what is to say that we wouldn't access that technology for the sole purpose of reversing engineering what we need out of it?
Well, you're absolutely right. But again, as somebody reminded you a couple of weeks ago, you're 20 years ahead of the masses. And the forerunners, the people who are in the vanguard, they need support. That's why I'm saying we need to support LIB Radio. Mm-hmm. We need to support what's going on here, because when you look at our community, there's a surge, an ongoing surge of anti-intellectualism that is being promoted within our community. So people like Keedy and people who are free thinkers, or people who are thinking from an African perspective, like Duar and myself, we don't get the recognition, or we don't have the platform. Even if when we do have a platform, because I have platform, it's just that the algorithms are keeping them suppressed and censored.
Yeah, that's right. Well, before we end today's broadcast, I want to remind people this is an emergency fund drive. Within the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes after we end the program today, can we see some progress? Can we see enough to get us through another week, another month? How many people will take it personally upon themselves to make a donation? The Cash App, you see that in your face. There's also the links to you can donate via the various times. There are donation links on Rumble, etc., etc. You will make a difference, but will it be today? That's the question. Your final thoughts for today's program, Brother Dwara?
I'll just close with 2 proverbs, both of them Yoruba proverbs. First one says, "Only as a kitten is the cat in deprivation. Once fully grown, it can do its own hunting." And the way I understand that is that we have to grow up a little bit here and mature and re-Africanize, and we need to do our own hunting and be self-reliant and self-sufficient, and stop relying on our historical adversaries and our captors and colonizers and neo-colonizers and invaders to provide us life and sustenance. Ashe.
Ashe. Very, very powerful. Baba Junius, your final thoughts for today's The Mastermind?
Just continue doing what you're doing. And we're asking our viewers and listeners to just step it up just a little bit to what they're doing, so that we can honestly say that we are sustaining and we're keeping our word and we're doing what we say we want to do.
Ashe.
That's right. Ashe, Ashe. Thank you, brothers. Thank you both for your loyalty, your commitment, and for doing your part to contribute to making LIB Radio whatever success we have done. It goes way beyond what I individually am even capable of. So to you two, I owe a great debt of gratitude, and to all of our listening audience all around the world on the various platforms To all of you, wherever you are all so very, very important. And on that note, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. You've been tuned into your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIB Radio. We are LIB TV. We are living in black. .com. So tell your friends to tell their friends. We have our own benefits on this journey. Some of you, over 20 years, you've been alongside your LIB Radio, LIB TV, and your Living in Black.com network. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you.